The dragon's scales, each the size of a human child's torso, were a patchwork of ancient wounds. For centuries, Nova had known only war, her roars echoing through desolate battlefields. Until Ilara, a girl no bigger than Nova's smallest claw, offered her a wilted flower. The bio-engineered behemoth was chained within the confines of Research Facility 7, a monument to forgotten conflicts. Her scarred hide a testament to battles waged across galaxies, long since crumbled to cosmic dust. The facility itself, a labyrinth of steel and reinforced concrete, hummed with the low thrum of containment fields and life support systems, a stark contrast to the raw, untamed power it held captive. Inside, bathed in the artificial sunlight of a hyper-clean room, 7-year-old Ilara Scora pressed her small hands against the transparent wall, her gaze fixed on the colossal dragon outside. The room, sterile and white, was her world, a meticulously controlled environment designed to protect her from a world her fragile body couldn't tolerate. Toys lay scattered, untouched, on the floor, pale imitations of a vibrant reality she could only observe from behind the thick, sterilized glass. Her eyes, wide and the color of a summer sky, held a longing that mirrored the vastness of space itself. Defiance flickered in those bright eyes, ignoring the soft, automated voice reminding her to remain within the designated zone. Ilara slipped past the medical monitors and deactivated the primary seal. A hiss of escaping purified air announced her transgression. Clutching a wilted flower, a pale violet bloom salvaged from a discarded nutrient solution, she made her way toward the dragon's enclosure. Each step was a small act of rebellion, a silent plea for connection in a world defined by separation. As Ilara neared the perimeter fence, proximity sensors whirred to life. Inside Nova, dormant systems awakened. A low growl rumbled in her chest, vibrating the very ground beneath Ilara's feet. Crimson light flared in the dragon's eyes, illuminating the intricate network of biocircuitry visible beneath her translucent eyelids. Combat programming, dormant for eons, surged to the fore, classifying the small, approaching figure as a potential threat. Ilara, no. Stephen Scora's voice, sharp with alarm, cut through the sterile air. He had been reviewing sensor logs when he saw her, a blip on the thermal scanners, heading straight for the most dangerous being on the planet. He sprinted down the corridor, his heart pounding against his ribs, a primal fear gripping him. He was a scientist, an exobiologist, but in that moment he was simply a father. He reached the enclosure just as Ilara extended her hand, offering the flower. "Nova," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising wail of the containment breach alarm. Stephen lunged forward, scooping Ilara into his arms, shielding her from the monstrous creature before them. The dragon's massive chains groaned under the sudden strain, the metal screaming in protest as Nova lunged forward, her crimson eyes burning into them. A holographic display flickered to life in Stephen's mind, a briefing from months ago. Subject designation, Nova, recovered from a derelict warship drifting in the Kuiper Belt. Preliminary analysis indicates she is a bio-engineered weapon, a relic from the Cygnus Draco War, a conflict so devastating it erased entire civilizations. The images flashed planets burning, cities reduced to rubble, all wrought by weapons like the one straining against its chains before him. His personal logs echoed in his thoughts. Ilara's condition is precarious. A rare genetic anomaly. Her immune system is virtually non-existent. She requires a completely sterile environment to survive. Contact with the outside world could be fatal. He remembered the countless hours spent in the lab, searching for a cure, a way to give his daughter a normal life, a life beyond the sterile walls of her prison. A new line of text scrolled across his augmented vision. Analysis of Nova's neural pathways reveals dormant but potentially active higher cognitive functions. Initial assessments severely underestimated her intellectual capacity. The implications were staggering. Was Nova merely a weapon or something more? He turned to the facility director, Dr. Aris Thorne, who had just arrived, his face grim. Aris, we need to reconsider our approach. She's more complex than we thought. Thorne shook his head, his gaze fixed on Nova. The potential benefits of studying her far outweigh the risks, Stephen. We can unlock secrets to bioengineering, weapon design. Technologies that could revolutionize our defenses. From behind the reinforced observation window, Alara waved tentatively at Nova, her small hand outstretched. "Hello," she mouthed, her breath fogging the glass. For a fleeting moment, Nova stilled. The crimson glow in her eyes flickered, dimming slightly. Her massive head tilted as if trying to understand. A low, guttural sound, not a roar but something softer, escaped her throat. It was a moment, a mere flicker, easily dismissed, but Stephen saw it. "We are proceeding with the scheduled invasive testing tomorrow, Dr. Scora," Thorne stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "For the good of humanity, we must understand this weapon." Stephen felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew what Thorne's testing entailed: dissection, vivisection, the systematic dismantling of a living being. He glanced at Alara, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes filled with a naive hope. He couldn't let them do this. He wouldn't. He worried about Alara's safety, yes, but now, looking at Nova, he felt a different kind of fear, the fear of squandering potential, of destroying something unique and irreplaceable. Thorne turned to leave, then paused. "We've detected unusual energy signatures emanating from deep space, Doctor. Preliminary analysis suggests remnants from the Cygnus-Draco War. They know we have Nova. They're coming to retrieve her." Stephen leaned closer to the holographic display, the intricate latticework of Nova's neural pathways shimmering before him. He zoomed in, bypassing the programmed limitations, pushing the system beyond its intended parameters. The data streams cascaded, a torrent of information he struggled to interpret. He saw patterns, anomalies, ghost echoes within the matrix, faint signatures of complex memory structures, hinting at a past life far beyond her war machine programming. The door hissed open, and Director Harding strode in, his face grim. "Scora, I need those neural scans finalized. The window is closing. Those war remnants are approaching faster than anticipated." "I'm still analyzing the initial data, Director," Stephen replied, not looking up. "There's more here than we initially thought." Harding's voice hardened. "We don't have time for academic curiosity, Doctor. We need to understand her weapon capabilities, not her personal history." He gestured impatiently. "I'm authorizing immediate, invasive neural scans. Prep her for the procedure." Just then, Alara shuffled into the lab, her small frame seeming even smaller in the sterile environment. A dry, rattling cough racked her body, and her cheeks were flushed with fever. She leaned against the doorway, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Stephen rushed to her side, his face etched with concern. "Alara, what are you doing here? You should be in your enclosure." "I wanted to see Nova," she whispered, her voice hoarse. She feels scared." Harding frowned. "Doctor, your daughter's attachment to this creature is becoming a liability. Her condition is worsening." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "The scans proceed, Scora, with or without your consent." Stephen's teeth clenched. "Director, I must protest. Invasive scans could cause irreparable damage to Nova, and Alara's health is declining rapidly with each exposure. I request a delay." Harding's eyes narrowed. "Denied. Her potential outweighs the risk. Prepare her." He turned and left, the door hissing shut behind him. A tremor shook the facility. Lights flickered erratically. Alarms blared for a split second, then died. Nova, within her containment field, thrashed violently, her roars echoing through the lab. The energy field pulsed, strained. "What was that?" Stephen muttered, his eyes darting between Nova and the monitoring systems. "Power fluctuation," a technician replied, his voice tight with anxiety. "System overload in Sector Gamma." Harding's voice crackled over the intercom. "Scora, report." What's happening with the dragon? Containment field is stable, Director, Stephen replied, his fingers flying across the console. But she's agitated. The power surge seems to have affected her neural activity. Exactly why we need those scans, Scora. Her instability is a threat. Proceed immediately. Stephen stared at Nova, her eyes blazing with primal fury. He knew that invasive scans in her current state could be catastrophic. But Harding was right, her instability was a danger to everyone, especially Alara. He glanced at his daughter, her face pale and drawn. He made his decision. Later, under the pretense of system diagnostics, Stephen accessed the neural scanning protocols. His hands moved with practiced speed, bypassing security measures, rewriting code. He subtly altered the parameters, reducing the intensity of the scans, minimizing the potential for neural trauma. It was a gamble, a direct violation of Harding's orders, but he couldn't stand by and watch them dissect Nova. As the scans began, Alara stood close to the containment field, her hand pressed against the shimmering barrier. Her eyes were closed, her face serene. Suddenly, she gasped, her body trembling. I see it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The fire, the metal, the screams. Stephen rushed to her side, his heart pounding. Alara, what do you see? What's happening? She's showing me, Alara replied, her eyes wide with wonder and terror. Her memories, the battles, the ones who made her. She began to describe images, fragmented scenes of a war-torn world, colossal machines clashing amidst fiery explosions, and alien figures in sterile white uniforms. Details that no one at the facility had access to, images that were not in any database. There was a city, Alara continued, her voice gaining strength. A city of silver towers, and then fire rained from the sky. She pointed to a specific point on Nova's head. There's a scar there from a falling beam. Stephen stared at the readings, his pupils dilating. Alara's descriptions were impossible. How could she know these things? Could Nova truly be sentient? A red alert flashed on the console. Encrypted transmissions detected, a technician announced, his voice strained. Origin unknown, they're broadcasting on a restricted military frequency. Harding's voice boomed over the intercom. Report, what's the content of the transmission? We can't decrypt it, Director, the technician replied. But the signal strength is increasing rapidly. They're getting closer. Stephen's blood ran cold. The war remnants, they were coming. He returned to the neural scans, his gaze hardening. He needed to understand Nova to unlock her secrets before it was too late. He delved deeper into the data streams, searching for answers. And then he found a hidden subroutine buried deep within Nova's core programming. Director, he said, his voice tight with urgency. I've discovered a failsafe, a memory wipe. If Nova deviates from her programming, her memories will be erased. Harding's voice crackled over the intercom. Activate it, Scora. Now, we can't risk her falling into the hands of the war remnants with all that information. Better a blank slate than a weapon for the enemy. Stephen hesitated. Erasing her memories, it felt wrong, a violation. No, he said, his voice firm. I won't do it. Scora, you are disobeying a direct order, Harding roared. Activate the failsafe or I will relieve you of your command. I can't, Stephen replied, his gaze fixed on Nova. She's more than just a weapon, Director, she's alive. Alara tugged at his sleeve, her eyes pleading. Daddy, please trust Nova, she wants to help, I know it. During the scan, Nova's massive head turned slightly, almost imperceptibly, towards Alara's voice. A flicker of something recognition, gratitude, passed through her reptilian eyes. The alarms blared again, louder this time. Cyber attack detected, a technician shouted. They're targeting the containment field. They're trying to disable it. Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from Nova, a focused beam that bypassed the containment field and struck Alara directly. Stephen lunged forward, shielding his daughter with his body, expecting pain, but it never came. Instead, Alara gasped, her eyes widening. I see it, she exclaimed. The weaknesses, the energy conduits, the shield harmonics. I know how to stop them. Stephen stared at Alara, then at Nova, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Nova had communicated with Alara, sharing vital information. She was trying to help. He straightened, his face resolute. I believe you, Alara, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. I trust you both. He turned to the technicians. Prepare for a counterattack. Use the information Alara received. Divert power to the auxiliary generators. We're going to reinforce that containment field. He looked at the lead technician. It may already be too late. Allowed to exist. The War Remnants fleet arrived without warning, unleashing a barrage of energy weapons that overwhelmed the facility's outer defenses. The sterile white corridors vibrated violently, alarms blaring a discordant symphony of impending doom. Through the reinforced viewport, Stephen watched as energy beams sliced through the sky, impacting against the facility's shields with blinding flashes. Shields at 20%. A frantic voice crackled over the comms. Multiple breaches on levels 3 through 7. Stephen, his face grim, barked orders into his own comm. All security personnel, report to defensive positions Alpha 1 through Alpha 5. Prioritize containment of the Dragon. That's the only thing that matters. Using the tactical information gleaned from Nova's fragmented visions, he directed the remaining security forces to key defensive positions, hoping to buy them precious time against the overwhelming assault. He knew it was a long shot, but he had to try. He turned back to Alara, his heart clenching. The air filtration system was failing. Dust and debris swirled around them. Alara's coughing intensified, a ragged, painful sound that echoed in the confined space. Her skin, usually pale but healthy, was now developing strange, angry red lesions. She was deteriorating rapidly, the sterile environment she desperately needed now compromised. Suddenly, a section of the ceiling groaned ominously and began to buckle. Before Stephen could react, Nova emitted a pulse of raw energy, a wave of shimmering force that slammed into the collapsing section, holding it in place just long enough for Stephen to pull Alara behind her massive leg. The effort visibly drained Nova. Her scales seemed to dull, the bioluminescent glow fading slightly, but her protective instinct was undeniable. The facility director, his face illuminated by the flashing emergency lights, strode into the observation room, his eyes fixed on Nova. Skora, the remnants are tearing us apart. We need to weaponize the Dragon. Now, Stephen's face hardened. Absolutely not. I won't risk her life or Alara's. We don't even know what the long-term effects would be. Risk? Skora, this isn't a debate. This is an order. We're talking about the survival of this facility and everyone on it. The director's voice rose, his face reddening. That creature is a weapon and we're going to use it. She's more than a weapon, Stephen retorted, his voice dangerously low. And I won't let you turn her into one. The director's hand moved towards his sidearm. The tension in the room thickened, palpable and suffocating. Gentlemen, a calm voice in Dr. Seated. Dr. Aris Thorne, a scientist who had been quietly observing Stephen's interactions with Nova, stepped forward. Perhaps there's a more nuanced approach we could consider. He glanced at Stephen, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Skora, I've been reviewing the archived data on the Dragon. There are certain aspects of her original programming that might be relevant. He lowered his voice. Meet me in my lab, discreetly. Thorne slipped away, leaving Stephen to face the director's simmering rage. After a moment, the director barked, I'm giving you 1 hour, Skora. 1 hour to prepare the Dragon for combat. If you refuse, he let the threat hang in the air before turning and stalking out of the room. Stephen, his mind racing, carefully lifted Alara into his arms. Her feverish skin burned against his touch. I need to do something, he muttered, more to himself than to her. I need to fix this. He found Thorne in his cluttered lab, surrounded by flickering monitors and stacks of data chips. I may have found something, Thorne said, his fingers flying across a keyboard. Deeper within her programming are self-destruct sequences, hidden weapon systems. But more interesting, the original scientists used unique bioengineering techniques. It's all in here. As Thorne worked, Stephen accessed Alara's genetic code, comparing it to the data Thorne was uncovering about Nova's bioengineered structure. A jolt of adrenaline shot through him. There were similarities, shared markers, almost as if her creation. It might hold the key to reversing Alara's condition, he breathed, hope flickering in his chest. Suddenly the lab door hissed open and 2 security officers strode in. Doctor, Apon's raised. Dr. Skora, you are ordered to report to the director immediately. The dragon is to be prepared for weaponization. Stephen stood his ground, Alara cradled protectively in his arms. I refuse. I won't let you turn her into a weapon. Nova, sensing the threat, shifted her massive weight. A low growl rumbled in her chest, and a faint blue energy crackled around her scales. With a controlled burst of energy, she incapacitated the security forces, sending them sprawling without causing any fatal injuries. Restraint, not destruction. We have to go, Stephen said urgently. Now. He knew they were out of options. He had to get Alara and Nova out of this facility, find a safe haven where he could understand Nova's biology and potentially cure Alara's condition. As they moved through the corridors, alarms blared. A voice doctor met over the intercom. Dr. Stephen Skora is now considered a traitor to the facility. He is to be apprehended immediately, along with subject Nova and the infected child. Use lethal force if necessary. Evading security checkpoints, Stephen activated a secure comm channel. This is Skora, I need immediate extraction, my location is. He hesitated, he wasn't sure who he could trust anymore. Never mind, I will find my own way. The response seemed hesitant, unsure. He then intercepted a garbled transmission. Primary objective, capture Nova. Reactivate weapon. The war remnants weren't just trying to destroy the facility, they wanted Nova. They wanted to turn her back into the ultimate weapon. Cornered. That's what they were. Stephen, Alara, and Nova found themselves in a restricted section of the facility, a storage area filled with deactivated drones and obsolete weaponry. The advancing war remnants forces were closing in from one side, the pursuing security teams from the other. Using the restricted data from Aris, Stephen punched commands into the console, rerouting power. A low hum vibrated through the floor, followed by a flicker of emergency lights down a corridor previously cloaked in darkness. This way, he urged, his voice tight, pulling Alara along. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of stale coolant and dust. Nova followed, her massive form barely fitting through the narrow service tunnel. Each step sent tremors through the deck plating, the sound amplified by the confined space. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, the clatter of boots, the crackle of energy weapons. Nova stopped, her immense head turning back towards the direction they had come. A guttural growl rumbled in her chest, building in intensity. Nova, no, we need to keep moving, Stephen shouted, but Nova ignored him. With a surge of power, she unleashed an energy pulse, focused and precise. The tunnel behind them buckled, metal groaning and twisting before collapsing in on itself, sealing off their pursuers. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and pulverized concrete. They pressed on, the tunnel twisting and turning. Alara coughed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The sterile air of her containment unit was a distant memory, replaced by the grime and recycled air of the facility's underbelly. Daddy, I don't feel so good, she whispered, her voice weak. Stephen stopped, kneeling beside her. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her breathing was shallow. He pulled out a medkit, his hands trembling as he administered a dose of fast-acting stimulants. Hold on, Alara, just a little further. He knew the stimulants were only a temporary fix. Alara needed a sterile environment, and fast. The service tunnel opened into a larger chamber, an abandoned research outpost, its walls scarred with rust and neglect. but outside the perimeter was heavily guarded. Security drones patrolled the area, their sensors sweeping back and forth. Nova nudged Stephen with her snout, then angled her head towards the drones. Understanding dawned in Stephen's eyes. "A diversion," he murmured. With a deafening roar, Nova unleashed another energy pulse, this time directed at the drones. The pulse overloaded their systems, sending them spiraling out of control, crashing into the perimeter fence in a shower of sparks. The guards, caught off guard, scrambled for cover. "Go, Stephen. I will hold them," Nova boomed, her voice echoing with a strange mix of purpose and sorrow. Stephen didn't hesitate. He scooped Alara into his arms and sprinted towards the outpost entrance, the ground shaking beneath his feet as Nova engaged the guards. The outpost was in disrepair, its equipment coated in dust and grime, but a few consoles flickered with residual power. Stephen laid Alara down on a medical bay examination table, its surface cracked and stained. "Rest, Alara. I need to see what I can find." While Alara drifted into a fitful sleep, Stephen accessed the outpost's database, his fingers flying across the archaic keyboard. Fragmented research logs filled the screen, detailing the original Nova project, its goals, its methods, its unforeseen consequences. He scrolled through the data, his heart pounding in his chest. Then he saw a section on genetic anomalies, specifically, a deliberate manipulation of the human genome to create a biological link between the dragon and a human host. He traced the genetic markers, comparing them to Alara's medical records. The match was undeniable. Alara's condition wasn't a coincidence. It was a deliberate consequence of the genetic engineering used to create Nova. A wave of nausea washed over Stephen, followed by a surge of anger. They hadn't just created a weapon, they had condemned his daughter. A sudden tremor shook the outpost. Alarms blared, their sound grating and insistent. The war remnants had bypassed the facility security and were launching a direct assault. "Damn it," Stephen swore, racing to the outpost's armory. He grabbed a pulse rifle, its casing scratched and worn, and headed towards the main entrance. The automated defense systems were offline, but with a few deft commands and some jury-rigged wiring, Stephen managed to bring a pair of laser turrets back online. They swiveled into position, their barrels glowing red. The first wave of attackers surged forward, their faces masked, their weapons raised. The turrets opened fire, cutting them down in a hail of energy bolts, but more were coming, their numbers seemingly endless. "Daddy, they're flanking us," Alara whispered, her voice weak but clear. "They're going to try to breach the west wall." Stephen stared at her, astonished. "How did you know that?" I just saw it," she replied, her eyes unfocused. "Nova, she sees it too." He didn't have time to question it. He trusted Alara. He rerouted power to the west wall, activating a secondary defense grid just as the attackers breached the perimeter. Outside, Nova was a whirlwind of destruction, her energy blasts tearing through the ranks of the war remnants. But they were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. During a brief lull in the fighting, Stephen noticed something. The war remnants weren't just attacking, they were transmitting a signal, a specific frequency that seemed to be affecting Nova. Her movements were becoming erratic, her attacks less precise. "They're controlling her," Stephen realized, his blood running cold. "They're using her own programming against her." He had to disrupt that signal. He raced back to the main console, his mind racing. The outpost's communications array, it was outdated, but it might be powerful enough to jam the frequency. He began rerouting power, his fingers flying across the keyboard. But as he worked, the war remnants breached the outpost's defenses, storming into the main chamber, their weapons trained on him and Alara. Nova, fighting against the external control, saw the danger. With a desperate roar, she lunged forward, shielding Alara from a direct energy blast. The blast struck her full force, sending her crashing to the ground, her scales scorched and smoking. The communications array sprang to life, bathing the chamber in a pulsating blue light. The control frequency wavered, then shattered. Nova roared, a sound of pure defiance, and unleashed a devastating counterattack, her energy blasts obliterating the remaining war remnants. The survivors retreated, disappearing into the shadows. But before they vanished, one of them deployed a small metallic sphere which attached itself to Nova's flank. A tracking beacon. Ilara coughed, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy, I saw something." In Nova's mind, a place with blue trees. "It's important. It can help me and her." Stephen stared at Ilara, his heart filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Blue trees, what are you talking about?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But we have to go there, it's the only way." He looked at Nova, lying wounded on the ground, her eyes filled with a strange mix of pain and perseverance. He looked at Ilara, her face pale but resolute. He knew they had no choice. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "We're going to find those blue trees." He hoisted Ilara into his arms, and together they limped out of the outpost, leaving behind the wreckage and heading towards an unknown future, guided by a dragon's memories and a little girl's unwavering hope. The journey was a relentless trial. Wind-scoured plains stretched to a bruised horizon, the ochre dust stinging exposed skin and grating in every breath. The skeletal remains of colossal, long-dead trees clawed at the sky, monuments to a forgotten age. But it wasn't the harsh landscape that gnawed at Stephen. It was the shallow, ragged breaths of his daughter. Ilara coughed, a wet, rattling sound that echoed in the desolate silence. Her face, usually flushed with life, was pale and drawn, her lips tinged with an unsettling blue. "Daddy, I'm cold," she whispered, clutching at his worn jacket. Stephen pulled her closer, his heart a clenched fist in his chest. "We're almost there, sweetheart, just a little further." But the lie tasted like ash in his mouth. He had no idea where there was, only the vague coordinates gleaned from Nova's fragmented memories. They stumbled upon it as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. A scattering of crumbling structures, swallowed by the encroaching dust, a ghost town whispering of a forgotten purpose, an abandoned settlement. "Shelter," Stephen breathed, the word a prayer. He lifted Ilara from Nova's back, the dragon carefully lowering her massive frame to allow the transfer. Ilara whimpered softly as Stephen carried her towards the nearest building, a dilapidated structure with a caved-in roof and gaping holes in its walls. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay and dust. Stephen laid Ilara down on a relatively clean patch of floor, his gaze sweeping the room for anything useful. Rusted containers, shattered equipment, and the desiccated remains of what might have been furniture littered the space. He found a tattered blanket tucked away in a corner and gently draped it over Ilara. "Stay here, Peanut. I'll see if I can find anything else." He left her with Nova, the dragon's presence a silent promise of protection. He moved cautiously through the settlement, each building a mirror of the last, a testament to a civilization swallowed by time and war. In the remains of what appeared to be an administrative building, he found a cache of data logs, their surfaces cracked and faded. He brushed away the dust, his fingers tracing the alien symbols. With a sigh, he pulled out his data reader, praying that the ancient technology would cooperate. The screen flickered to life, displaying fragmented text and distorted images. He scrolled through the files, his eyes scanning for anything relevant. The settlement, it seemed, had been a research outpost, dedicated to studying the planet's unique energy field. Experiments, readings, theories, a jumble of scientific jargon that slowly began to coalesce into a picture of a planet teeming with untapped power. A low growl rumbled through the air, vibrating in Stephen's chest. He looked up, his hand instinctively reaching for the energy pistol at his hip. Nova stood at the entrance to the building, her massive head held high, her nostrils flaring. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Nova tilted her head, her reptilian eyes fixed on the horizon. "They are coming," she projected, her thoughts a cold weight in his mind. "They have found us. The war remnants. They had tracked them. Stephen cursed under his breath. He had hoped for more time, time to rest, time to understand, time to save his daughter. But time, it seemed, was a luxury he couldn't afford. He raced back to Alara, his mind churning with possibilities. He had to protect them, both of them. He had to find a way to hide. "We need to move," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Now." He explained his plan as he worked, his fingers flying across the data reader. The settlement's original purpose might just be their salvation. If he could tap into the planet's energy field, he could mask Nova's unique signature, disrupting the tracking beacon. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. He rerouted power conduits, bypassed damaged systems, and coaxed the ancient technology back to life. The air crackled with energy as the settlement began to hum, a low, resonant vibration that resonated deep within his bones. As Stephen worked, Alara stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice weak, "I saw something." He paused, his heart sinking. "What did you see, Peanut?" "A door," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Underneath, a place, hidden." An underground facility. Could it be true? Another secret buried beneath the ruins. Before Stephen could respond, the sky erupted in fire. Explosions rocked the settlement, sending debris flying through the air. The war remnants had arrived. "Now," Stephen yelled, scooping Alara into his arms. "Nova, go, underground, now." Nova roared, a deafening sound that shook the very foundations of the settlement. She charged towards the center of the settlement, drawing the enemy fire, creating a path for Stephen and Alara. He followed close behind, dodging laser blasts and crumbling debris, his energy pistol spitting bolts of plasma. They reached the spot Alara had indicated, a seemingly solid section of ground that shimmered with a faint energy signature. Nova slammed her massive claw against the ground, the earth cracking and splitting, revealing a hidden entrance. A dark, gaping maw leading into the unknown. Without hesitation, Stephen jumped. Alara clutched tightly in his arms, plunging into the darkness. Nova followed, her massive form barely fitting through the narrow opening. The ground leveled out, revealing a vast, subterranean complex. Corridors stretched into the darkness, lined with flickering lights and strange, humming machinery. The air was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the dust and decay of the settlement above. This was no mere shelter. This was a laboratory. Cryogenic pods lined the walls, their surfaces frosted with ice. Strange devices hummed with scarcely controlled power, and in the center of the complex, a massive chamber pulsed with an eerie green light. Stephen moved cautiously, his senses on high alert. He found more data logs, more fragmented information. This facility, it seemed, had been used to conduct experiments on beings genetically similar to Nova, attempts to create a weapon immune to the control frequency used by the war remnants. Failed experiments, discarded prototypes, genetic dead ends. Alara tugged at his sleeve. "This way, Daddy," she whispered, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "I know the way." He followed her, trusting her instincts, her visions. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, past dormant machinery and silent chambers until they reached the central chamber. Inside, a holographic projector cast a shimmering image into the air. A detailed genetic map, spiraling and complex, a blueprint of life itself. Stephen stared at the map, his legs shaking. He recognized segments of the code, familiar sequences from his own research. But there were also anomalies, deviations, genetic markers he had never seen before. "This," he breathed, his voice filled with awe and dread. "This is it. This is the key. The key to Nova's original design." And he realized with a jolt the key to a potential cure for Alara's condition. As he studied the map, Nova stiffened, her body trembling. Images flashed through her mind, memories long suppressed, resurfacing with brutal clarity. She saw her creation, the sterile laboratory, the cold, calculating faces of her creators. She remembered her purpose: to destroy, to conquer, to obey. A surge of power coursed through her veins, threatening to overwhelm her. She roared, a sound of pain and rage, a primal scream against her own existence. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber shuddered. Explosions echoed through the complex. The war remnants had breached the defenses. They were trapped. Laser fire ripped through the air, tearing chunks out of the walls. Stephen grabbed Alara, pulling her behind a shattered console. Nova roared again, unleashing a torrent of energy, a wave of pure force that slammed into the advancing soldiers. Their weapons sputtered and died, their communications cut off. They staggered, disoriented, their faces contorted in confusion. But the energy pulse had also triggered something else. A klaxon blared, a piercing shriek that echoed through the complex. Red lights flashed, illuminating the chamber in a hellish glow. Self-destruct sequence initiated, a synthetic voice announced, its tone cold and emotionless. T-5 minutes. Stephen swore, his mind racing. They were running out of time. Alara pointed to a section of the genetic map, a previously unnoticed sequence hidden within the complex code. There. She cried, her voice filled with urgency. A failsafe, an override. Stephen followed her gaze, his eyes scanning the code, searching for the key. He found it, a hidden sequence, a complex algorithm designed to disable the self-destruct sequence. His fingers flew across the console, inputting the code, racing against the clock. The chamber shook, the walls cracking and groaning. Come on, he muttered, his breath catching in his throat. With a final keystroke, the code locked in. The klaxon fell silent. The red lights flickered and died. He had done it. He had saved them. But the relief was short-lived. As the self-destruct sequence deactivated, a new protocol initiated. A hissing sound filled the air, a subtle, almost imperceptible release. A genetically modified virus, designed to eliminate all traces of the Nova project, and then Alara collapsed. Her body convulsed, her skin flushed with fever. She gasped for air, her eyes wide with terror. "Daddy," she choked, her voice barely audible. I can't breathe." Stephen caught her in his arms, his heart shattering into a million pieces. The virus, he realized with horror, was targeting individuals with her specific genetic anomaly. It was designed to kill her. He looked at Nova, his eyes filled with desperation. She stared back, her face a mask of anguish. They were trapped, cornered, facing an enemy they couldn't fight, and Alara was dying. Stephen stared at the holographic projection, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling as he manipulated the complex genetic structure of the released virus. It was a cruel masterpiece, designed with terrifying precision to target Alara's unique genetic marker, a cruel irony considering she was patient zero. Each twist and turn of the helix seemed to mock him, a scientific taunt. He swiped a hand across his brow, the sterile sweat stinging his eyes. "Damn it," he muttered, the word lost in the hum of the facility's failing life support. A low, guttural growl resonated from Nova, a sound tinged with pain and a flicker of recognition. Fragmented images flashed across her mind, cold metal tables, invasive procedures, the relentless probing of her DNA. The experiments. She remembered the experiments. Vague shapes of scientists in white coats, the sting of needles, the burning sensation of genetic modification. The memories, though fractured, were enough to send a shiver down her colossal spine. They were trying to build in a failsafe, Nova rasped, her voice still rough from disuse, a way to control rogue bioweapons. Genetic locks. Stephen's head snapped up. He refocused on the holographic projection, his mind racing. Failsafe. Genetic locks. He saw it then, a subtle pattern embedded within the virus's code, a mirror image of the modifications made to Nova. The knowledge to create a counter-virus wasn't just present, it was screaming at him, hidden in plain sight within the very weapon designed to kill his daughter. A surge of adrenaline coursed through him, hope igniting in his chest. Suddenly, Alara gasped, her eyes fluttering open. A faint, ethereal glow emanated from her, bathing the room in a soft, otherworldly light. The energy, the core. she whispered, her voice weak but clear. She pointed a trembling finger towards a specific sequence within the holographic genetic map, a region linked to Nova's core energy matrix. "It's there, Papa. I can see it." Stephen stared at the indicated sequence, his heart pounding. It was an anomaly, a region of highly concentrated energy signatures unlike anything he'd ever seen. He ran simulations, cross-referencing it with Nova's genetic data. The results were undeniable. The counter-virus could only be synthesized using Nova's energy as a catalyst, but the process would be incredibly risky, potentially fatal to Nova. He turned to Alara, his face etched with anguish. It could weaken her, Alara. It could trigger her programming again. Alara reached out, her small hand finding his. "She trusts us, Papa. We can do this. We have to." Stephen closed his eyes, wrestling with the impossible choice. His daughter's life hung in the balance, but saving her could mean sacrificing Nova. He looked at Nova, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding, a silent offer of trust. He knew what he had to do. "All right," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "Let's get to work." He formulated a plan, a desperate gamble using the facility's dwindling resources. He would use the facility's core energy extraction technology, a technology designed to siphon energy from geothermal vents to extract a small, controlled amount of energy from Nova. It was a delicate procedure, fraught with danger, but it was their only chance. As the extraction process began, Nova shuddered, her scales shimmering with an unnatural light. The pain was excruciating, a burning sensation that ripped through her very being. Her combat programming, dormant for so long, surged back to the surface, triggered by the perceived threat to Alara. Her eyes flashed crimson, her claws extended, and a primal roar erupted from her throat. "Alara, get back!" Stephen yelled, scrambling for a weapon, but Alara stood her ground, her eyes locked on Nova's. Despite her weakened state, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her, she reached out with her mind, her heart, her very soul. She focused on the bond they shared, the kindness she had shown, the trust that had blossomed between them. "Nova," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar. "It's me, Alara. We're not hurting you, we're helping each other. Remember." The effect was immediate. Nova's roar subsided, her crimson eyes softened, and her claws retracted. She looked at Alara, a flicker of recognition in her gaze. The combat programming fought for control, but Alara's unwavering presence, her unwavering love, held it at bay. Stephen, his heart pounding, worked feverishly at the synthesizer, channeling Nova's energy into the counter-virus. The machine sputtered and groaned, pushed to its absolute limit, but finally a vial filled with a shimmering, iridescent fluid emerged. He rushed to Alara, gently administering the counter-virus. Her eyes fluttered closed and she slumped against him, unconscious. He held his breath, waiting, praying. Slowly her color returned. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes fluttered open and she looked at him, a weak smile gracing her lips. "I'm okay, Papa." But the counter-virus had done more than just cure Alara. It had rewritten Nova's genetic code, permanently disabling her combat programming and severing the control frequency vulnerability. She was free, truly free. As if in response, the facility groaned, the lights flickering violently. The energy extraction had destabilized the core and the entire structure was threatening to collapse. "We have to get out of here," Stephen shouted, grabbing Alara. But as they turned to flee, the ceiling began to crumble, blocking their path. "Nova!" Alara cried. Nova, now fully in control of her powers, unleashed a torrent of energy, a wave of pure force that stabilized the collapsing structure, holding it together just long enough for them to escape. They burst out of the underground facility, stumbling into the fresh air. The sun was rising, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and gold. They stood there, silhouetted against the dawn, gasping for breath, their bodies aching, their spirits soaring. Nova looked at the ravaged landscape, the scars of war etched into the very earth. A new grit filled her. "I will protect this planet," she declared, her voice resonating with newfound strength. "I will help it heal." She would become its guardian, its protector, a living testament to the transformative power of kindness and compassion. Alara, now healthy and strong, took a tentative step forward, venturing out of the sterile cleanroom for the first time in her life. The unfiltered sunlight streamed down, threatening to overwhelm her sensitive skin. But Nova gently lowered her head, shielding Alara from the harsh rays with her massive wing. Alara looked up at Nova, her eyes filled with wonder and gratitude. Then together, they turned their gaze towards the stars, a shared future stretching out before them, a future filled with hope, healing, and the unwavering bond between a human child and an ancient alien dragon.